everybody, and welcome to another Top 5 board gaming video. Today I'm going to be talking about board games that are based specifically on pen and paper style RPGs. Before I get started though, if you haven't done so already, please take a look at all my social media pages as well as my Patreon. On all of those, you can interact with me and my channel in a whole bunch of really fun and cool and unique ways. That said, moving right into the video, I mentioned that this is going to be based off of pen and paper RPGs, in other ones where you are tracking your character sheet, you're rolling dice, and sort of dictating whatever it is that you're going to be doing. These are some of the games that really got me into more hobby style gaming. I started with D&D 3.5. I've talked a little bit about RPGs in general, but I was really excited to do this video because I found some board games over the years that do a decent job, at least, of capturing that pen and paper RPG style feel. As always though, I would love to hear what you guys have to say. Please put any and all thoughts in the comments below and let me know what are the games that you really enjoy, or more importantly perhaps, why is it that you don't really like these types of games? Do you just not enjoy the pen and paper? Do you want something a little bit more tangible? All that kind of stuff. Please let me know everything in the comments. But with that, we're going to get started with my number 5. At number 5, I've got Star Wars Rebellion. And this is a little bit of a cheat, obviously, because Star Wars is not originally a pen and paper RPG, but before I started playing Star Wars board games, I played the Star Wars Edge of the Empire, Age of Rebellion, Force and Destiny, all of those kinds of things, which are published also by Fantasy Flight. And so that was sort of my initial foray into the style of game that you can get with Star Wars and really being in the universe. And obviously I'm a big fan of Star Wars and all that kind of stuff. But again, that's why it's so low on the list, is because it was not originally a pen and paper RPG exclusively, but you can make the argument with pretty much anything, whether it's Rebellion, Imperial Assault, the upcoming Star Wars Legion, X-Wing, Armada, blah 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 blah. All of these kinds of things really do a good job of capturing the feel of that role-playing game because you feel like you're really in control of something. And I like Rebellion in particular because I'm a gamer who prefers sort of the larger picture type of thing in general, if I'm given the opportunity. So like in D&D, I like being able to command troops and that kind of thing if I'm able to. And Rebellion is just such a deep game. It has a wonderful asymmetry between the Rebellion and the Imperial sides that it just does a really good job. But again, lower on the list because it's not exclusively a pen and paper RPG initially, but still, really great game, and it made me reminisce primarily about Age of Rebellion and things of that nature. But either way, Star Wars Rebellion, my number 5. At number 4, I've got Shadowrun Crossfire. Shadowrun was my first foray into the cyberpunk theming, and I gotta say it was probably the most fun that I've had of most RPGs. I'm a big fan of doing real solid roleplay during my pen and paper RPG sessions, and Shadowrun made it really fun because I'm a huge tech nerd, and so I was just like, oh, so much fun, I can do all that kind of cool thing. And on top of that, Shadowrun also has a really decent Steam game that I like to play as well, so it crosses over rather nicely, although I've talked about crossing over and doing the digital and analog, but that is neither here nor there. For the purpose of Shadowrun Crossfire, this is a deck building game. It's a little bit lower on the list because I don't feel that it captures the feeling of Shadowrun as much as some of these other ones do, but at the same time I just love the cyberpunk theming so much, and it does remind me enough of actually sitting down and playing a game of Shadowrun that it's really, really nice. You don't have the same like dice rolling and all that kind of thing, but again, for me, it's more about the world. It's more about the talking and chatting and just sort of describing as I'm playing the cards, even though it's not really necessary to do that. Still having that same feeling as the pen and paper RPG. Shadowrun Crossfire, my number 4. At number 3, I've got Dungeons & Dragons adventure games. Now, how could I have a pen and paper RPG to board game thing without talking about D&D, right? In this case, I've got Legend of Drizzt, but we've also got Castle of Ravenloft. We've got, Against the Giants is the new one, and then the Wrath of Ashalon, I think is how the name of the dragon is pronounced, but either way, all of these games are based off of the 4th edition D&D rules, for those of you who are familiar, where you've got your at-will, encounter, and daily powers. I personally didn't really like doing that as a pen and paper thing, and that's why this is higher up on the list, because when I tried it in a board game, I was like, oh wow, this is really cool. And I really liked the way that the mechanics shifted into a board game style, because as a pen and paper style game, the whole idea of 4th edition, it kind of dumbed down 3.5 and like 2, which is what kind of made me upset, and not to mention a lot of other gamers as well. Most people really didn't like 4th edition, but it fit very, very nicely into a board game. And particularly the adventure style game where it's like a dungeon crawl, you still get XP, you're fighting the monsters, you're rolling the dice, you're doing all of that kind of stuff. It's still super fun, and you really have that in a really good context, I guess, is a good way to say it. It does feel much more like the pen and paper RPG than the other ones that I've mentioned so far. And on top of that, it's Dungeons & Dragons. Like, how can you go wrong with it? But just because of the fact that the mechanics aren't the best, I'm not a huge fan of them. Much prefer 5th edition. It's a little bit lower on the list, but the D&D adventure games, my number 3. At number 2, I've got the Pathfinder adventure card game. The thing I love about this is the ongoing aspect. It feels like a campaign, and that's really what translated for me personally wonderfully from the pen and paper edition of Pathfinder or D&D or whatever it is into this game specifically. Because in this case, you've got your different decks that represent the adventures that you're going on and all the different things that you're doing, and it just fit so well. Again, you get to roll dice, you've got a little bit of like deck building-ish going on, you have your random encounters, you have the bad guys, you've got decisions to make. It's all in here, and it's great. And in this case, I've got Rise of the Rune Lords. There's a couple of other sort of campaigns on it, but Rise of the Rune Lords is like the campaign title, and then within it, you've got several different adventure decks that you go through. So there's a lot to these games as well. But either way, Pathfinder adventure card game is my number 2. At number 1, I've got a game I don't think I've ever talked about before, and that is Paranoia. This is one that I actually played the board game before I played the pen and paper version of it. And the thing is, the overall idea is it's a semi-dystopian future, cyberpunk-ish, but not quite, where everybody's got a clearance and everything is run by the master control computer, and happiness is mandatory. And it's really funny because in the pen and paper game, you've got your regular sort of dice rolling, regular role play, all that kind of stuff, and it's hilarious because you really have to stay in character, and that's the thing that I love. And in the board game, they transfer that aspect. They transfer the aspect of really staying in character and the idea of like happiness is mandatory, because that is an actual thing in the original RPG, and that's maintained in the board game. And I think that Paranoia, of all the ones here and why it's number 1, does the best job of taking the feeling and the style and the overall atmosphere of playing the RPG into the board game. And it's tremendously fun. I believe it's out of print right now, but if you ever get a chance to play it, I highly recommend it. Paranoia, my number 1. Well, everybody, that's going to be it for me. I hope that you enjoyed this video on my top 5 favorite pen and paper RPG games that got transitioned sort of kind of ish into board games. Now, obviously, a few of these I bent just a little bit in terms of what counts as a pen and paper RPG and that kind of thing. But again, most of this for me personally was about how the feeling and how the actions, the activities, and me as a gamer felt that the experience was similar between the pen and paper RPG and the board game. And obviously I'm curious what you guys think about this. Do you enjoy these kinds of games? And if you do, what are your criteria to determine if it's good or bad, better or worse compared to the pen and paper? As always, let me know in the comments below. You guys know I love to hear from you. But that said, thank you very, very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you next time.